Hello my stitching friends, I'm Suki, the Brown-Eyed Stitcher, and I'm here for another tutorial-ish type video. This will be my third, I think. I have one all about 10 stitching. I tried to gather everything I knew about 10 stitching and explain the different varieties, give some tips and hints, things for you to think about if you decide to take on 10 stitching. I have another video on converting skin of fancy ladies like Mirabilia or Bella Filipinas from over 2 to over 1 skin. So this one is going to be all about backstitching. And when I say all about backstitching, it's really what I do with backstitching, and maybe it's not all right. I don't know, but I have maybe 2 helpful things to say and some demonstration. And I think the demonstration is what works for most people. I do have my plastic canvas ready to go, and then we will be transitioning from that into some actual stitching so that you see backstitching in progress on an actual chart that needs to be backstitched. Let's go. Here's my plastic canvas prepared with some stitching I just made up, and I have some other yarn already threaded up. So my first tip is don't try to be a thread miser with backstitching. Don't try to be economical too much with how you go about backstitching. It's going to take thread, and that's okay. So to start, I'm just going to start up. Where do I want to start? I think I'm going to start here on this corner, and I'm going to work my way around this way, and then we're going to go into the middle of it. So this is the back side of that corner. Now normally you're backstitching with just one. So what I do is one strand I mean. So what I like to do to anchor my floss is to run it over under a couple stitches and then loop back through just this last stitch to help anchor it even more, because usually one strand will slip out very easily. So I'm just going to run back through this last one. Okay, now that's going to be pretty much anchored right there. So backstitching on your pattern is going to look like straight lines in segments. You might see one straight line. You might see it follow the curve like this, like a stair step, or you might see it straight along that stair step. You might see it start to go straight and then curve, like it'll be a straight curve. It won't be, you will never see like a rounded curve in backstitch, because backstitch doesn't work that way. So this is our farthest square, and I'm going to work around this way just as a reminder. You could totally work the other way, whatever your preference, okay? This is the far right square. I'm going to take one square to the left right here and start there. Backstitching is like 2 steps forward, 1 step back. That's what it feels like, okay? So now we're going to go back into the right hole. And now we're going to go 2 steps forward. We're not going to go back in this square we just did. We're going to go one more further. So 1, 2. And then we're going to go back in the square on the right. Go 2 to the left. 1 to the right. Two to the left. 1, 2. One to the right. And now you can see how that back stitching gets put into place. Okay, so now we've got this long diagonal side. I'm going to show you two things first. One is make a stair step, where we're still going to follow the square exactly. Your pattern will show your backstitch line either like right where they want you to stitch. So this will look like usually it's a black line right along the stitches if they want you to stitch it like a stair step. Okay. This one is a little bit annoying to me because of this little bump on the back right there. You won't see it so much on regular fabric, but you might be able to see right here a little bit of it peeking up behind it. If that bothers you, if your fabric is one like I don't know in which case you might see it peeking out like that, but if it bothers you, what you can do is just run your needle underneath that, like that, and then it'll kind of pull that loop down when you keep backstitching. So now it looks more straight and you can't really see it. I'm not usually that fussy. It just depends on how my stitches are lying in the moment. Another thing you could do is never mind. Well, another thing that you could do is when you come back up is to hold this yarn over to the side while you stitch more of it. So I'm still holding the loop back here, but now when I put my finger or my needle back through, that thread in the back is going to catch on my needle and will just land exactly where I want it to. Like that. Now, you might see it that way, or you might see just a diagonal straight line. That means we're going to go down to this hole and then back up on the diagonal like a half cross. And then we go down and make another half cross. Which you do here or here will depend on your instructions. And you just go one stitch at a time. One back stitch will most of the time be just one stitch like that when you see a long unbroken line. You'll break up each of those lines into individual stitches. Okay, so I'm going to work along this bottom, and then this next diagonal is just a little different. I will explain when I get there. Okay, so on this side, we just had one square going down and to the left each time. Here, it's one square up, but two squares over. So you might see it outlined like this, but if you see a straight line, instead of trying to break it up into little stitches like this, you won't be able to. You're going to instead go to that point where it's one up and two over, and go through there, and now go backwards to meet up with your last back stitch. And you do the same thing. It's one up and two over instead of one up and one over. So this is where it becomes very important to look at your pattern and notice the angles of your back stitching. Is it angled like this? Or do you have one that angles here and then angles like this? So you have to start noticing those lines. Where are they connecting to and from? And what's the angle that it's at? Usually the line will have a bend in it when it's telling you you have to change what angle. Because sometimes you might have something that's like this interspersed with something that's like this. Or maybe even longer than this, like 4 up and 3 over. But the principle of backstitching is always the same. You go forward and then you go backwards. That's why it's called backstitching. You go forward, wherever forward is, and then go backwards. One thing that is important with your backstitch is to try to not split your threads that have already been stitched. Otherwise, they won't lay on the outside or on the top, wherever it is that they are needed to lie. I would also not pull too hard on your back stitching, otherwise they can slip too far into your crosses instead of sitting up where they can be their outline and give that detail that you're looking for when you backstitch. Okay, so now we have totally encased that. Let me show you the back. It's going to take a lot of thread. You're traveling the back twice as much as you're traveling the front each time. So it's going to look a little bumpy. It's going to look maybe not the smoothest, but it's the back. That's okay. From the front, you get this. Okay, so sometimes backstitching will go along straight lines here. Here's where you can get a little creative in deciding how you want to stitch it. You can do just like we did on the outside and stitch each of these individually. Unless your instructions say differently, this is what they intend you to do, is to break up each of those long lines into individual stitches. Remember, we don't want to pull too hard either. You can see I pulled a little too much on this one, so it looks a little lower. I might fix that if I were backstitching for real, but for now I just want you to see the difference. Sometimes though, you might look at your pattern and realize that this looks weird. Maybe you have a bunch of these kind of longer lines, and then all of a sudden you have this, and that might look odd together. So then, maybe going 2 squares looks better for that specific part of your pattern. It's okay to do that. That's a choice you have to make as you are stitching. If you are in doubt, just go with the individual stitches and it will look great. Okay? The only thing I would hesitate is to make these too long. If you make them too long, they could get snagged very easily. Okay, like this. See that? Now it moves very easily. Same thing on the back, because now there's a really long line on the back and my needle could still catch this. Or if I rubbed against it with a ring or something, or scissors, any number of reasons could make this too long. So unless your instructions are telling you to make long stitches specifically, they won't call it backstitch most likely. I usually see them as long stitches or part of a specialty kind of stitch. Back stitches are specialty stitches actually. But normally you're just going to do that. And then you can branch out and do something a little longer like that. The only other tip I have, actually let me end this thread, which I basically do the same thing as when I started. I run it under a couple stitches and then I rerun that last stitch once. Now this was a nice, neat little example. I just followed a path around and then went back and forth in rows. In actual practice of backstitching, you might have one diagonal and then you have to go off on another angle and then you come back and you skip some of things here, but then you have to go back and do another line like that. So when you are deciding how to path your backstitch, the biggest thing I can tell you is to always go forward and then close your stitch into back. Move forward and then close it in the back. The second tip being is to remember what elongating your stitches are. Actually, let's do this from the... Okay. So here is a stitch. And it looks nice, doesn't it? Elongating your stitches means that your back threads are going out like this, and now your stitch looks very different on the front. That's elongating your thread. When you're back stitching, you're constantly doing, if you can see through the plastic canvas, you're constantly pulling your threads like this, so they are never elongated. But if you do have a situation where you have lots of lines with open ends and you're just not sure how to path it, think of how you can move from one line to another line without elongating the stitches. Let me put this back on the needle and I will try and demonstrate that. Here. Okay, so I'm just going to do a couple back stitches on a diagonal here. Okay, now let's say that that's it, but now the next closest back stitch is kind of over here. So now I have to think, I just went down in here, so I don't want to bring my thread out this way because that would elongate this stitch. Instead, I want to try to keep it like on this side of that stitch as much as possible instead of on this side. So maybe instead of working my way from the top down, I work my way from the bottom up. You can't avoid it all the time. There are going to be some times when your stitches get elongated more than you want them to, but the more you can eliminate that, the nicer your back stitches are going to look. The other thing for me to demonstrate is how you start and end a backstitch in the middle of nowhere. Say you have backstitch letters anywhere. You have no stitching to anchor it to. And maybe you can't, well, a pin stitch is not usually a good idea for backstitch. But sometimes you can do a pin stitch and then cover it over, like you can play with this. But let's say you have, there's your pin stitch, and then in order to not have that center one there, you would have to go over it again. I hesitate to say do it that way because it would make it much thicker than any of your others. Can you see the difference in that? It's the same distance, but this one that we did a pin stitch is much thicker. So I would hesitate to do that. Instead, I do what you're not usually supposed to do in cross stitch, and I make knots. I know, I do it. So let's say I put in my first back stitch right here, and then I come back here, and I just tie a knot. Okay. Not just a square knot. When you think of how thick backstitching is, and how this is only one strand of floss normally, you can barely feel the backstitch or the knot when you do it that way. And now I can just stitch. Sometimes I don't cut the ends that early, so I can try to weave it in a little bit as I go. But now I can backstitch all the letters, do all the things that I need to do. Oh, let's try this. I'm just making this, I'm making this up as I go. And when I reach the end of my thread or the letter and I need to finish it off, I tie another knot. Even though there are enough threads that I could weave under, they're very loose because backstitching goes over 2 on the back. And I don't want my things to come undone. So here's what I do. Okay, so I've circled around and I'm going to put my needle through. And then, it's hard to do this while holding that. Here we go. And then I'm going to tighten it and leave another loop right there so that I can go through it one more time. And then I tighten it all the way, like that. I've never had one of these come out. So on the back, we have a knot here and we have a knot here. It's a little thicker than our regular backstitch back, but not by much. You can feel them, but it allows you to anchor your threads when you're out in the middle of nowhere. Okay, I have my Under the Sea project, and I have this section that is ready to be backstitched. You can see that I have been backstitching as I go, and so now it is time for this section. To show you the instructions for this particular chart, it will tell you whether you are going to be using one strand or two strands. In this case, we are doing a black line, so we are using 3799. And we're going to just pull off and thread our needle. You might find that working with a shorter length of thread is nice, or you might prefer a kind of longer length. So play around. If your thread is knotting up on you, go shorter, it's fine. All you have to do is start and stop it again. Alright, I'm going to start up here with the fish. So let me show you the pattern for the fish. So I have done all the stitching, as you can tell. And there's no right or wrong way to work through. There's not one right way for how you path your backstitching. There's one way back here, and then it kind of grows as we go this way. And then I have another animal over here. So I might want to start back here and work up this way and then back through the middle this way and then here. And then if I happen to have more thread, I can hop on over to the lobster and get started on that backstitching. So that's how I'm going to path here. All right, so I'm going to start right back here on the fish. As I showed you before, I run my thread under, and if I just do that and tried to start stitching, that pulls out for me a lot of the time, which is why I like to anchor it by just running it through that last stitch one more time. Okay, so in the pattern, I decided I was going to work up the top. So I'm going to take this one in the back and then do this one. So I'm going to start with going up here and down here. This allows my stitches to not elongate. Okay. Then I'm going to take this long one and I'm going to go up here and down at the back of the tail of the fish. Okay. I could do this one, but I'm going to ignore it for now, and I'm just going to work my way up this line. So there's one short diagonal, and then this one is a longer diagonal. It crosses two squares, but only goes up one. So first the short diagonal. And then the long diagonal, up 1 and over 2. Now this one has a lot of stitching in it, so I want to try to get my needle in a good spot and not split any threads. Okay. Now from here, I could finish these 2 lines, or I could hop up here and do this square, or this line. Which way I do it, I'm going to think about elongating my stitches. So if I were to end here and do this line first, and then come here, it would elongate my thread right here, my stitch here. So I'm going to come up here and do those 4 back stitches, and then come finish these 2. There'll be a little bit of elongating, but not as much. Okay, so there's a short diagonal, and then it's going to be 2 flat ones on the top. And then another diagonal. Now, so here, I will mark what I have done. I don't know, this is the same color highlighter, so it's probably not a great idea. But I did that, I did this, I did that one and this one, and I did those. The tip of my highlighter has ink all over now. Okay, so I still have to go through these 2 on the bottom. Right here. So I'm going to come up in between them and then go back. And then I'm going to come up on this side and then go down. Look how good that's looking already. So now I'm going to come down here. Let's see, I think I'm going to come get the eye. And then I'm going to do this like L1. And then I'm going to do this diagonal. And then I'm going to come back here. Okay, so I'm going to do the eye first. And since I am up here, I'm going to come to the bottom and go to the top. That helps eliminate that elongating any stitches. Let's see. It's right here, so come from the bottom up to the top. And then I'm going to hop over and go from left to right, and another left to right, and then down to up. Okay, so now we've got this, and it's going to be one longer back stitch. I'm going to go from this bottom one to this top one because I'm coming from here and I'm heading over here. So it uses more floss to do it that way, but it makes it look nicer on the front than if I were to stitch up here and down here to come over here. So I'm going to come up from down here, and then I'm going to go up here towards the eye, and then I'm going to head back here to the tail. It might not be helpful because I'm saying back here a whole lot, or from here. But I hope it is visible clearly for you. Okay. All right. So now all I have left is to come down here and get all of the belly and up through here. Okay. So one of the hardest things sometimes to tell is if you have grid lines versus a backstitch line. In this case, my grid lines are a light gray and my backstitch is a black, so there is a very clear difference, and I know that I need to do a vertical stitch right here. But when in doubt, I always could look at any other fish in this case, but that may not always be something you can do. You can just compare, oh, this is a vertical backstitch versus right above it is just a grid line. Okay, so this one is going to be a long stitch. I'm going to come over here and then go backwards to there. Up and back. And now I'm going to go down, down and up. Now, this right here is very long, and you can see that the line intersects right there. So it goes up to here before you change angles, but it intersects here. So instead of going and making this one long stitch, I'm going to make it two. One from this corner back here, and then up from that corner to the middle of it. And then I'm just going to round out the nose here with two diagonal backstitching. Now, I just realized that going around this way means I'm ending with this stitch and my needle on this side. So I don't actually want to just hop over to the lobster, otherwise it's going to elongate that leg of the stitch. And that's okay because I'm not entirely sure that this is a great place to start on the lobster anyway. So I'm going to end my thread. I don't usually do a double anchor when I end it because I'm not going to be pulling on this at all. And the fish is now finished. Look at that. Okay. So now if I look at the lobster, it seems like there's a lot going on. All parts of it. It's got lines coming through the midsection. We've got this coming out here. We've got some coming down this direction. We've got all of these. This one is super long, and this one's also long. So what I am going to do is, let me think about this here. This long one could be tricky, but I don't have to do it all at once. I could start right here, so I have a place to anchor my floss, jump up here, come down to maybe here, and then come back up into the claw and work my way down here. And then either work this way or come in and do more of this, the claw, and come all the way down this way. I could do that. I think I will at least start here and see where I go. I'm going to start up here in the claw. Okay, I'm going to do the two underneath. And then I'm going to do the top one, which is up one and over two. Now I'm going to come up here and find where it is. I know where it is in connection to... I lost about a minute of recording there, but I just continued down here, making sure to check all the angles. Some of these last two were like down 2 and 3 over, so I made sure that I could see where that backstitching line intersected my grid lines and stitched from there. And then I came back up here to the claw, and now I'm just stitching on that. It's totally fine to just play with it a little bit. Sometimes I don't choose the best pathing, or I find that I've gotten myself in a place where to jump from one to another stitch is going to be a little bit elongated, and that's okay. Okay, so I just went up here, and now I have a line that's going to come down here, and I'm going to do that. As a whole, there's so much backstitching happening that it's okay if I miss something every once in a while. Okay, here there's two lines on a diagonals that meet in the same hole, so it doesn't matter which one I do first. I will just do both of them. And they go right there. This next one is 1 over and 3 down. 1 over. 1, 2, 3 down. Okay, now I'm going to hop over here and do this middle section. That seems to be what's right. But now right there needs to go right over here. Oh, I got my tail caught, and I can tell because my last back stitch looks slightly thicker. Let's see if I can just kind of pull it out. Not that one. There we go. All right. I'm going to connect up to this line. Yes, connect up to that line. This one actually has me going in the middle of a stitch. All right. So I'm just going to keep working on this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to path here, up through the claw, and down this way, which is going to end me really far from the lobster. So I might end up stitching on some of these tentacles instead of coming back up here. And then when I end my thread, I'll come back up here and work on more of the lobster. My camera is struggling. My phone is struggling to record. I think I have figured it out, but I don't know yet. So, let me get my needle here. So I came around here and down here. And what I was saying about this, that didn't record, is that this lobster had to get fudged a little bit. This claw is in the right spot, but then I made a slight counting error, and then when I discovered it, I just decided to, I would fudge basically. So it's all a little bit off from the claw, but that's okay. But it does mean that my back stitching, I've needed to fudge it just a little bit, and you wouldn't even be able to tell if I don't tell you what I did. But there's two spots so far in this line and in this line that I had to fudge. And here I actually made one decision, decided I didn't like it, and changed the decision to make more of a gradual, like, sloped line instead. But now I'm down here, and instead of jumping all the way back to the claw, I'm just going to get some of these tentacles. I'm going to get this tentacle right here. I just need to make sure that I get in the right spots. And I will stitch this out until I run out of floss. And then I will start back in on the lobster again. Okay, so from here, I'm going to jump over to here. There's definitely more backstitching in all of these lines, but I don't feel the need to finish one out if it doesn't make sense to with what's closest and where I'm coming from and all of that. So play around with it a little bit. Take a look at your own backstitching. Follow it as best you can, but if it's kind of crazy like how this pattern is with a lot of backstitching, like look how much is in here. There was so much backstitching here. It took me 3 hours to do this. I didn't have to just follow a line. I could just go all over the place and make sure I got everything. And if you find that you're losing what you've done and haven't done, just grab a highlighter and mark your backstitching. Just don't pull your stitches too tight or they will slip down in between your crosses. Okay, I don't want to risk finding out if it's going to behave now and film how I want it to, or if there's going to be problems. So I will end here, and I hope that you have seen something that either will help you, or if you've never tried backstitching before, that you feel a little confident to just take the plunge and get in there and try it. It's not really scary, it doesn't need to intimidate you, but it's okay if it does. You can always message me if you are stuck on something. You know, if all else fails and you have a project that has a ton of backstitching, you can send it to me and I'll do it for you. Like, I am totally fine doing that. Save them all up and send me 5 at one time. That's okay. So I will keep going on this backstitch and then come back and show you what it looks like all finished. Okay, it is the next day, so it took me several sessions of backstitching over 2 days. I will pop up on the screen here how long it actually took me to backstitch. You will have already seen the time lapse of it, and I will just let you know how long it was in real time, so you just know. But here we are with the final section right here. Backstitching always makes it look so good on these charts. It's honestly my favorite part about stitching this particular chart is the backstitch. So I hope that you found something in this video about backstitching that is helpful to you, or maybe you have some tips to share with me. So comment away and let me know. But all I have to leave you with is take courage and go forth and backstitch. Bye, my friends.